So welcome back. In this lesson, we will learn how to write our data to the disk. For writing our data to the disk, we're going to introduce a new LST. So let's go to our app.data.h. And in here, I'm going to say we have the current LST. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it, new one, and call this one offline LST. So this is the list of the lists that are currently on our disk at all times. Whether we are reading them or writing them, we use the offline for the on-disk stuff. And as you can imagine, later on we'll add another one that's called online LST, and those are the ones that we use when we want to communicate with our cloud server. So let's save this one. That's the only thing we have to do in our app data. And I have to add a new class that is writing data to disk. So command N and a subject, write data to disk. Next. So in my new method, in my new class, in write data to disk, all I'm going to say is there is only one method of the class method called write. That's all it is called. Let's copy that, go to my .m, and here is where we have to actually do something. So in here, we want to do a few things. First of all, we want to get a shared instance as before. So we have to import our app data. So first thing, import app data. Go to our write data, and I'm going to say app data shared instance equals app data shared manager. So that part is taken care of. Then the next thing we want to do is we're going to say shared instance dot offline LST is NS mutable array new. So every time we want to write, we make this new, and then we will convert the things that we have in our current LST to this file. I will explain that in a second why we are doing that. This is a bit of a provisioning for what's coming up in the future, and it kind of makes sense that we will look into that right away. So let's see what we are doing. I'm gonna say for grocery list class any in shared instance dot current LST. All right, so that part we got. We want to say for these, any of them that belongs to our current user. So any that belongs to current user should be written to disk. Now you might be wondering, how could be a list? There could be a list. How could there be a list that doesn't belong to current user? This is something that's going to come up in a few lessons from now. When we read lists from our online server, then there might be a chance that this is a list that we have been invited to it. And this isn't actually our list. Because of that, we have to be careful about here. So I'm going to go in here and say if any dot list owner dot uid equals shared instance dot current user dot uid, then what you want to do is you want to say shared instance dot offline LST add object any to it. So one more time really quickly, in here we're trying to populate our offline LST only with our own lists. We don't want to copy any list that belongs to other people to our local disk. We don't want to write them to our disk unless they're ours. So we first have to make sure that we get only the ones that belong to us, and we put them in a list called offline LST. So now that we have that, it becomes a lot easier. So now we go to the writing part. For the writing part, I'm going to keep this here for a few seconds. If you want, you can pause the video in here and catch up to me, or you can just, download the file that is coming with this lesson. So once we have that, I'm going to say NSArray path, that is ns search path in directories in domains and ns documents directory. And let me just bring this one line down. Okay, ns user domain mask, and yes. All right, so let me just push this down, ns user domain mask, and yes. So we got access to the paths that our user has access to them. Then I'm gonna say ns string, and I'm gonna call this one docs directory, and that is paths object at index 0. So that's the very first one. And then I'm gonna say I have another one, ns string, and this string is gonna be, let's call it data path. My data path is gonna be ns string with format, and the format I want to give it is essentially whatever you find, add a / to it and say data.property_list in docs directory. So basically find the docs directory, put it in here, put a little bit of / between it, and then store everything in data plist. And that's exactly, what we want. And the final piece of code in here is going to be very easy. nskeyed archiver and archive root object. And the object we want to archive is shared instance dot offline list to file data path. So one more time, and this time I'm going to go from the bottom up, and that's going to be what you want to do is you want to, have I missed something and there is a warning in there? Oh, yes, I have percentage at, of course, for this location and then /. So sorry about that. From the bottom again. So we are archiving object offline LSD to this location. This location is in our documents directory, the very first one, and a file called data.property_list. Offline LST itself is everyone that is in the current LST and does belong to us, to our current user. So if we use this method, we can write our information to our disk. So let's keep it up to here, and then we come back in the next lesson.